She had no idea that the man whose hand she desperately clutched in the hospital waiting room was worth billions. All Eliza knew was that when her world collapsed around her, he was there, a stranger who stayed when everyone else had gone. If you've ever believed that fate brings people together in our darkest moments, this story might just restore your faith in the universe's grand design. Like, subscribe, and join me on this journey of unexpected love that proves sometimes our greatest blessings arrive disguised as ordinary moments. The fluorescent lights of Manhattan General Hospital buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across Eliza Carter's tear-stained face. 23 hours she'd been sitting in that same vinyl chair, watching doctors rush past without answers about her little brother. The coffee in her hand had gone cold hours ago, much like the hope in her chest. When the man in the rumpled suit had taken the seat beside her around midnight, she'd barely noticed him. Just another face in the crowded emergency waiting room. "Family or friend?" he'd asked, his voice surprisingly gentle for someone who looked like he'd stepped out of a board meeting. "Brother," she'd whispered, her voice cracking. "Car accident. He's only 16. The stranger had nodded, offering nothing but his presence. As the night stretched into morning and the waiting room gradually emptied, he remained. When the doctor finally appeared with a grim expression at 4 a.m., Eliza had instinctively reached out, grabbing the stranger's hand with surprising force. "Hold my hand," she'd said, not a request but a desperate plea as the doctor approached with news that could shatter what remained of her world. The man, Alexander Reed to the business world, Alex to the few who truly knew him, had been surprised by the strength in her grip. In that moment, he wasn't the CEO of Reed Enterprises or the billionaire whose face occasionally graced financial magazines. He was simply a man who couldn't bring himself to leave a broken girl alone in her darkest hour. "Your brother's condition has stabilized," the doctor said, "but he'll need specialized surgery. The procedure is complicated and expensive." Eliza's grip tightened, her knuckles white. "How expensive?" The figure the doctor quoted made her blood run cold. Even with her 2 jobs and the meager insurance policy her parents had left behind when they died, it might as well have been $1 billion. "I'll figure it out," she said with hollow confidence. "I always do." Alex watched her face carefully, the determined set of her jaw, the flash of fierce love in her eyes despite the exhaustion etched into every line of her face. He recognized something in her that he rarely saw in the polished, calculated world he inhabited, raw, uncompromising authenticity. "You should get some rest," he told her after the doctor left. "I can stay if you want to catch a few hours of sleep." Eliza shook her head, finally releasing his hand. "I don't even know your name." "Alex," he said simply, offering nothing more. "Eliza Carter." She attempted a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you for staying, Alex." Most people would have pulled their hand away. What she couldn't know was that Alexander Reed had spent years with people clinging to him, for his money, his influence, his connections. But no one had ever held his hand simply because they needed someone to hold on to. The next morning, Eliza was surprised to find Alex waiting outside her brother's room with coffee, real coffee, not the hospital's watery excuse for it. He'd changed his suit, she noticed. The new one fit him perfectly, unlike the rumpled one from the night before. "You came back," she said, accepting the coffee with confusion. "I said I would." He shrugged as if returning to a hospital to check on strangers was something he did every day. Over the next week, Alex appeared daily, sometimes bringing food, sometimes just company. Eliza was too consumed with worry about her brother and the mounting hospital bills to question why this well-dressed stranger kept returning. She assumed he was between jobs or perhaps worked flexible hours. The truth, that he was rescheduling international conference calls and running a global corporation from his phone in hospital corridors, never crossed her mind. What began as chance evolved into routine. Alex found himself drawn to Eliza's world, so different from his own. She lived in a tiny apartment in Queens, worked as a barista mornings and a bookstore clerk evenings, all while taking online classes toward a teaching degree. Her life was a constant struggle against financial gravity, yet she approached each day with a resilience that humbled him. For Eliza, Alex became an unexpected anchor in the storm. He never offered money, somehow sensing her fierce pride, but he offered something equally valuable, unwavering presence. When she broke down after learning her brother would need a second surgery, Alex held her without empty reassurances. When she celebrated small victories, her brother's first steps in physical therapy, an A on a difficult exam, Alex's genuine pride made the moment sweeter. Neither acknowledged the growing connection between them, the way their hands would find each other's during difficult moments, the way their conversation stretched longer each day. For Eliza, relationships had always been a luxury she couldn't afford, not with her responsibilities. For Alex, genuine connection had become so rare he barely recognized it when it appeared. The truth emerged on a rainy Tuesday, 3 weeks after they'd met. Eliza had arrived at the hospital to find her brother's medical team expanded, the equipment in his room upgraded. When she questioned the nurse, she was told a medical foundation had selected her brother for an experimental treatment program, all expenses covered. Which foundation, she'd asked, suspicion blooming. The nurse had shown her the paperwork, the Reed Foundation for Medical Innovation. That evening, when Alex appeared with takeout from her favorite Thai place, Eliza confronted him in the hospital garden. "You're Alexander Reed," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "The Alexander Reed." He set the food down carefully. "Yes. Why didn't you tell me?" The betrayal in her voice cut deeper than he'd expected. "Would it have mattered?" he asked quietly. "Of course it would have mattered. I've been pouring my heart out to you about money problems while you're worth, what, billions? That's exactly why I didn't tell you," he said. "The moment people know, everything changes. I'm no longer Alex. I'm a walking bank account." Eliza paced the small garden, rain dampening her hair. "So what was this? Some kind of social experiment? Slumming with the commoners to feel better about your privilege?" The accusation stung because it contained a grain of truth. Hadn't he initially been fascinated by the novelty of her life, so different from his? But it had become something else entirely. "The first night, maybe I stayed because I was curious," he admitted. "But every day after that, I stayed because for the first time in years, someone saw me, not my money, not my company, just me. Do you know how rare that is?" Eliza stopped pacing, studying his face. The sincerity there was unmistakable, but the hurt remained. "You watched me stress about medical bills when you could have written a check without blinking. And you would have hated me for it," he said softly. "Your independence matters to you. I respected that. So instead you went behind my back. I helped your brother get the best care possible. I won't apologize for that." The rain fell harder, soaking them both as they stood at an impasse. Finally, Eliza spoke, her voice barely audible above the downpour. "Thank you for helping Jamie. But I need time to process this." Alex nodded, understanding that the easy companionship they'd shared had been irreparably altered. As he turned to leave, Eliza called after him. "Why did you really stay that first night?" "The truth." He paused, rain dripping from his expensive coat. "Because when you grabbed my hand, you weren't holding on to a billionaire or a CEO. You were holding on to another human being. Do you know how long it had been since someone touched me without wanting something in return?" The weeks that followed were difficult. Eliza's pride warred with her gratitude. Jamie's recovery accelerated with the specialized care, but each improvement reminded her of the gulf between her world and Alex's. She missed their conversations, the comfort of his presence, but couldn't reconcile the Alex she'd known with Alexander Reed, whose company's latest acquisition made the front page of the business section. Alex respected her request for space, though it cost him more than he'd expected. He'd grown accustomed to hospital cafeteria coffee and the quiet joy of being simply Alex. The boardroom felt colder now, the penthouse emptier. It was Jamie who finally bridged the gap. During a physical therapy session, he'd asked about that guy who used to visit. He's busy running his empire, Eliza had said with more bitterness than intended. Jamie had given her a look far too wise for his 16 years. He didn't look at you like an emperor looks at a subject. The truth of those words lingered. That evening, after Jamie fell asleep, Eliza found herself in the hospital garden where they'd argued. To her surprise, Alex was there, sitting on the same bench where they'd shared countless conversations. "Your security detail is slipping," she said, approaching cautiously. "I didn't see them." He looked up, surprise and hope flashing across his face. "I don't bring them to the hospital. This is the one place I'm just Alex." She sat beside him, leaving careful space between them. "I've been unfair. You've been honest. There's a difference. The foundation that's helping Jamie, is it real? Or did you create it for us?" Alex smiled slightly. "It's real. Started it 5 years ago after my mother died of a treatable condition because she couldn't access specialized care in time. So you're actually a decent human being, not just a billionaire with a savior complex?" "I'm trying to be," he said simply. "Though I'll admit, meeting you has made me question a lot about how I've been living." Eliza studied him in the garden's dim light. "I miss talking to you," she admitted. "The real you, not the Forbes cover version. They're the same person, Eliza. The difference is that with you, I get to be all of me, not just the parts that fit on a balance sheet." Slowly, they rebuilt their connection, this time with full awareness of their differences. Alex showed Eliza glimpses of his world, not to impress her, but to share his life as she'd shared hers. Eliza challenged him daily, questioning business practices he'd never examined, introducing him to perspectives his privileged life had sheltered him from. When Jamie was finally discharged, Alex helped them move to a modest but comfortable apartment closer to the rehabilitation center. Eliza accepted this assistance only after Alex agreed she could repay him by helping restructure his foundation's outreach programs. Their relationship evolved gradually, neither rushing what both recognized as something precious and rare. On the anniversary of the night they'd met, Alex took Eliza back to the hospital garden. "1 year ago, you grabbed my hand and changed everything," he said, taking her hand in his. "You saw me when I'd forgotten how to see myself." Eliza smiled, squeezing his fingers. "And you became my unexpected sun when I was lost in darkness. I've run a global company, made and lost fortunes, but nothing has ever terrified me as much as this moment," Alex admitted, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. From his pocket, he produced not a ring, but a simple key. "This is to my home, my real home, not the penthouse where I sleep. It's a place no one else knows about. I'd like to show it to you, if you're willing." Eliza accepted the key, understanding the magnitude of what he was offering, not wealth or status, but genuine vulnerability. "I'd like that very much." As they left the garden hand in hand, neither the billionaire nor the girl from Queens could have predicted the journey ahead, the challenges they would face, the worlds they would bridge, the lives they would change together. But both knew with absolute certainty that whatever came next, they would face it as they had begun, holding tight to each other when the world offered nothing else to hold on to.